And
it's easy, and it gets easier as you go along.
Yeah. And then as you relax, you'll notice you flow a lot more too. Chen's not necessarily known for its flow. And that's why I like the Guan Ping approach, where we merge the lessons of Yang, the flow of Yang, into the rigidity of Chen, or the martialness of Chen, the sharpness of it. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say rigidity because it still has its flow. But in doing so, it really, Chen looks good all by itself, but when you merge it with the flow of Yang, it's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. And then when you're able to then take the martial aspects of Chen and re-inject them back into your Yang practice, oh man, it's fantastic.
So they're related.
Absolutely.
The moves are the same. It's just a different style.
Mm-hmm. There are some different moves, like the diagonal position doesn't exist in the Yang house, right? But there is a wave hands like clouds in Chen. There's a move that's very similar to playing the pipa in Chen, and there are kicks and things in the Yang style that come much later in your practice. That's why we're going to spend some time in Chen in a couple of the classes, so that when we go back to Yang and we start learning those more advanced moves, you'll be able to apply those principles of movement and rooting that you learned from Chen into Yang.
That would be the Yang 24, these other moves.
Yang 24, you're going to find moves that we haven't done before, or that we haven't really utilized them just yet. And then from there, I mean, the forms just continue to go up from there. It's also, using the Guan Ping approach, it's also a great way to learn the sort of the original form, the Tai Chi 37, which doesn't exist to any house, but it's a part of the Tai Chi classics. And it's 37 moves. It's fantastic. It sort of incorporates all the different houses at the same time, none of the houses in its own right.
This was the first Tai Chi
it's
movement?
It's the one, if you buy a copy of the Tai Chi Classics, it's the form at the back of the book. Right, so I believe, I forget which house came up with it, but it's sort of an amalgamation of all the different philosophies into one sort of pure form that we have. Because all the different houses are just looking at that jewel from a different perspective. Right, and no house is right, wrong. No house is more pure than any other. They just are, and they're a new philosophy, a new way of looking at Tai Chi. But you always end up finding, you can take Market Street, you can take Broad Street, we're going to end up at City Hall, right? And so that's how you should view the other houses. Just a new way to explore the principles, as it were.
It ends up at the same place.
You still move with the dantian into the root. You still express through the arms. You still have to have your principles of balance. So your alignment, your low center of gravity, your weight distribution, your flow. The end of the last move is the beginning of the next. All of those play out across every house that's out there.
That's why we want to get the fundamentals down before.
Mm-hmm. And one of the ways to drive it home is to play in a different house. That's why we're doing it with Chen, because you know the principles, but there's a repetitiveness with just studying in the Yang style. I want to shake things up and have you apply the principles in a different house with moves that are not familiar.
And you certainly are. But again, it brings a challenge to it. And learn something new.
Absolutely.
Which is what we should be doing, learning something new.
And then refining that. When you learn a new move, then the journey is learning something new about that move every time you go in with it. Or learning something about your Tai Chi practice from that move that you didn't have going into it. And then applying all of that throughout. I used to think when I was in college that the professors use all of the research that they get from their students to further their own research. And I'm guessing that's probably right.
Probably is.
Because I do the same thing. When we're in class and I'm breaking the move down for you in my head, I'm breaking the move down even further for me. So I'm teaching myself the same time I'm teaching you. And then I can take those things, go back to my teacher, see if I'm right, and if I can line it up with the principles, then yeah, there it is. You've done it. You have arrived, as it were, which is fantastic and fulfilling experience.
Just get better doing that. You get better at it doing that.
Which is funny because as you get better at the principles, and even though Tai Chi gets harder as you go further, it gets easier to do the harder stuff.
See, that's a deep concept for me. It does seem to be getting harder.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm getting better at it, it's more challenging as we go along.
Yep. But you wouldn't be there if you hadn't learned all these things.
Right.
It almost feels like you're always drowning in Tai Chi. Your head is just above water.
I'm not the only one that's drowning here?
I'm there. Don't worry.
You don't seem to be drowning, but I know what you're saying here.
Not in your classes, I don't, because I'm just rehashing stuff that I've done, but I'm also refining that stuff. So don't think that I'm not training in those classes right alongside you guys. There's sort of two classes going on. There's actually three classes, which is kind of crazy. There is the class that I'm giving you, or the class that you're taking, the class that I'm teaching, and then the class that is going on in my head. So there are three classes going on simultaneously, which I can only experience two of them, but they're happening.
Every time.
Every single class. Every single class. And that's why I like training with you guys, being up there, actually doing the moves with you, because there are times I make discoveries right then and there, right in class. And it's amazing. That is amazing moments. And I don't know, you probably haven't picked up on when that happens, but the more we train, you'll start to recognize it, because you'll recognize it in yourself as we go and go along, which is always a fun moment. I think it's one of the best moments out there. And every once in a while, like I said, you'll have a breakthrough where it changes the entire way that you approach your Tai Chi, which, my God, I just want to see how this does its thing. Yeah, there'll be this moment where you just learn how to do something completely differently, and you'll apply or you'll better understand how the principles affect the body, and then you apply that to everything else, and it's like starting over again. Only, you're not starting over again.
Something like an aha moment. Aha, this is how this goes. Mm-hmm. This is this transition.
Because what'll happen is in your form, you'll get to points where it just doesn't feel right. You'll know it. You'll be able to go start to finish. You'll hit all the points. You'll come to me and I'll look at your form and I'll say, very good, you're doing great. But you'll feel like something's off. You'll feel like you're not flowing as well as you think you should be flowing. And at that point, you'll play with it. And you'll just play and play and play. And then at some moment in that play, you're going to realize what it is that was missing.
I see the speed that you move at has a lot to do with it.
It does.
Like you say, you were practicing slow Tai Chi. Well, to do it slow is different than to do it at warp speed.
It is.
It's definitely different.
And the danger of doing it faster is that you end up slacking on your principles.
You're missing out on the... I find it hard to go real slow, but I find it better because you get it more.
So in certain ways, yeah, you're absolutely right, especially with the Yang 8, because you can rely on inertia and momentum to bounce back and forth.
Right.
So if your principles are slacking, you can get away with it.
Right. The kinetic energy will bring you to the next move,
Correct.
but you're not properly...
Correct. That's why we slow things down.
Right.
And also, when you're moving slow, but you have to be constantly moving, that's a whole different frame of mind.
It is.
Than going fast and just getting to the end.
Well, it's important to do it slow because then you see parts of it that you're not seeing when you're going fast.
And when you speed up in the Chen style, what ends up happening is your rooting ends up suffering And so you don't get as balanced, and your transitions are not as smooth. So going slow at first and really getting a feel for all that. And then when you speed it up, you realize, I'm missing something. Why am I off balance when I'm speeding it up and not when I'm going slow? That's when I should be off balance. But the way the Chen style works is if you're not rooted, it doesn't matter how fast you are. You're not going to be able to just swing through these things. You're going to have to root. Otherwise, you're going to get wobbly, and you're going to have to kick off that back foot and do all those cheats that we do instead of following the principles at large.
It's almost like two different forms. If you're doing it real slow and you're doing it at normal speed, it's almost like two different forms. It's the same moves,
very much,
but they flow differently. Yeah.
And when you really get it down, there is a natural speed to them all. We play slower than we will once you're in your advance, because there is a point where the momentum and all of that does take effect, and your body is going to move things around in a certain way that there's going to be a constant pace, which is faster than what we're practicing now, but it's not that much faster. That's the thing about it.
I see on the YouTube videos when you're doing it at the speed it should be done. But we're learning, so we might want to learn it slower.
Correct.
Then bring it up to the speed we do in class. But what your speed is, and it looks better that way at that speed.
Yeah.
It looks good.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, Tai Chi is just beautiful no matter what, right? But yeah, at that speed, because you really start to see the looseness of all of the joints and how everything works and comes together in these streaming motions where each part of the body is, and that's not the whole body, that's one limb that's sort of moving throughout as we do all these things.
You see you're more relaxed at that speed.
You have to be, or you won't pull it off.
Right.
You won't pull it off.
And it took a while to get to that point, I'm sure.
Oh, God, yeah. And many, many breakthroughs.
Yeah.
Many, many breakthroughs over the course of many different forms. Now, for me, I learned the 8 in an afternoon. But by that point, I had learned the 8 is the fourth form, the fourth open hand form that I learned. So it's also the shortest one that I ever learned. Well, there you go. I mean, that makes sense that after learning the 24, the Chen 27, and the 108, I didn't have to learn the moves. I knew the moves. I just had to learn the transitions and then apply the principles. But even after that, I had to get comfortable in the form before I could do something like I did in the advanced video on YouTube. Otherwise, because I was just as choppy and shaky on everything as well. The only difference was I had a frame of reference for what the moves were supposed to look like at their end. It's really all it was. The transitions and all I still had to learn. I was lucky enough to have a pretty good teacher. She's awesome, actually. Thank you for joining us for that clip of our weekly podcast. If you want to get more bonage footage or join us for the entire podcast, head on over to Patreon, where our Eagle, Tiger, and Dragon subscribers get access to not only what we cast and talk about, but advanced lessons in your forms, in your Tai Chi, and in your life.